Hi guys, welcome. Today, 3 high school students are going to be talking about civics engagement, and we're going to introduce ourselves, starting with Aimee.
I'm Aimee. I go to Central High School. I'm from Champaign, and I'm in 12th grade.
And I'm Shamar. I go to Urbana High School. I'm from Carbondale, and I'm in 12th grade.
I'm Jordan. I go to Central High School. I'm in 12th grade, and I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is data. And it shows that high school students, or like just young people in general, aren't interested or engaged in civics. How do you feel about that? And do you agree?
I feel like that would be wrong. Just like in a like casual everyday thing, like everyday talk, I feel like people are very like civically engaged. Like throughout, like you go throughout your day in high school and like people are always talking about like what's happening currently in the world. And like there's like definitely kids who already have like, they take a stand on that. And like I believe in like our school there's like a Students Demand Action like group in there, and that was started by students. So I feel like young people not being involved is like not true.
I agree.
I also agree.
What are your thoughts?
I feel like social media plays a big part of getting information out there now too, especially with like the younger audiences and generations, because not everybody watches the news at our age and stuff like that, and being able to see clips or videos and stuff like that on social media allows them to get the information still and have all the topics that are going on in the world.
Yeah, I feel like social media is like a very big part of it.
Yeah.
Like definitely with like current news, no one's really looking at newspapers or like staying up to watch the news.
Yeah, right.
But, like through social media, you can get like firsthand accounts of like what's going on and people from that area and then, like exactly what they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there are a lot of like little groups and just pockets like in school. Even, you remember we did the protest at school for like the...
Oh, yeah, like there was...
What is it, Palestine?
I think it was, Free Palestine, like protests inside the school.
Like there's a lot of stuff like that just happens. And aren't you in a club that does stuff like that too? What club are you in?
I'm the president of African American Club.
Yeah, just little things like that students orchestrate.
Yeah.
Okay, next. How would you personally define civics engagement?
I feel like being civically engaged, it's just like knowing what's going on and like not just dismissing it. I feel like a lot of people, they hear about what's going on and they're like, oh, well, I can't do anything because I'm just like, I'm 16 or I'm not, like, don't count. I'm just one of many. And I feel like being civically engaged is even doing like the tiniest things, even just like spreading the word about something, or just, I don't know, being able to provide information to others about what's going on in the world, and just like really knowing like where you stand and how, and being really open to helping other people, and like being aware of all the political things going on around, even like locally.
Right. I agree with that. I want to add on and say basically just getting involved, kind of like you were saying, like with how you guys did the Free Palestine protest in the school, stuff like the Starbucks boycott and stuff like that. If you just stop getting your coffee every couple of days or whatever, that's stopping the funding of genocide and all these other things like that. So definitely knowing that you have a place and you can make a change in your community.
Did you guys do the Starbucks protest?
Yeah, I've not bought a Starbucks.
I've never went to Starbucks anyway, so.
Like, did you actively stop using any brands because of the conflict?
Yeah, I stopped going to Starbucks. I stopped really going to McDonald's and stuff like that. And like, it's like, there's times like maybe it's a slight like slip up, because of like conveniency.
Yeah.
But like, but I like do my best to like stop consuming products from places that are funding very very horrible things.
Right. Yeah.
And do you guys have like friends and peers who also participated?
Of course. Yeah.
I do. Yeah, but I also have people who are just like very rude about it, where they were like, why would I do that? Like, it's not gonna affect anything. But like, it shows it's affected things. Like, before, Starbucks literally had no commercials at all. Like, rarely ever saw a Starbucks ad, and now they're everywhere because they're losing business. And no one's buying their stuff.
Okay, when's the last time you remember like participating personally and being like civically engaged? Like you've intentionally done it.
I think it was during like the Black Lives Matter movement back in quarantine, like when it really happened, and when we had like there was a protest here, and it was like started like in Hessel Park. And it was like a very big thing. I was a part of that, and I went through that, and I brought my family with me, and like my parents, they're like immigrants, so some things are a little like twisted, a little backwards, but like I explained to them everything about it, and like how the news was portraying in a very malicious way, which like it wasn't that. So there was some people that were acting that way, but it wasn't everyone. And so I brought them out with me to the, I don't know if it was necessarily a protest, but it was like a walk through Champaign. I remember there was a lot of people, and I brought them to that. I think that's at the recent time I was like really engaged in it.
Okay.
As for a time I was like super engaged community wise, there hasn't been many times I can like name, but within my school I've definitely like fought for the voices of being the African American Club co-president, my black students in the school, and then just trying to get our voices heard and spread throughout the community and everything. So
Do you think you're civically engaged in school? Like by others, even like teachers and staff?
I don't know necessarily, because I haven't gotten a chance to really go into the clubs. I don't have much free time outside of school. But I've always tried to like, at least like tell people about clubs that I know like some of my friends have, and they're like focused on stuff like of African American Club, and like the Students Demand Action. I try to like at least get it out there.
I'd say I'm civically engaged in my school. Just kind of like I said, getting students' voices heard. Like if we had a conflict with a teacher, and they were on our way to the African American Club meeting, and they were stopped and told that they had to leave the school, and I don't know. It was a teacher. He was starting mess with the kids and everything, just saying they had to leave the school because it was after hours and they didn't have a reason to be there and everything. But they were on their way to the meeting after some complications with the locker. So it's just, I think they filed a report on that because they felt it was racially motivated and everything. So
yeah, that's kind of odd.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think being civically engaged looks different in and outside of school, or just different in different spaces?
I feel like yes. I feel like in certain areas being civically engaged isn't like, not to say like not safe. However, there is spaces where like in the workplace, if you're just trying to just do your job, like I feel like you can be civically engaged and like be outgoing of what you think of the world and stuff. However, there's also like people around you that will also have like opposing opinions, and that sometimes causes conflicts within like the workplace. I feel like in school it's a lot easier because like we're all young, so it's a lot easier to like, if you do like get into disputes, it's like not really that big of a thing because it's like you're teenagers, not really much they can do to you. I feel like it's a lot easier to do and to be civically engaged in school because you have like a constant flow of like knowledge of current events. Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's more space and more like
more acceptance overall.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's more likely that you'll find someone that agrees with you or like supports you in school than like outside.
Yeah, it's like a good place to find like like-minded people. I feel like
it's more because too you're surrounded by people that are your age and going through the same things and might have these same opinions or beliefs and thoughts on the situation and everything.
It's like older people, they have their own opinions on things.
Do you think, were you taught civics engagement in school or anywhere else, or did it come to you?
I feel like I wasn't taught about civic engagement until like high school. I feel like in elementary school and middle school, anything that's like civically like civic engagement is like really like historic or like past. They don't really talk about like present things. I feel like that's a bit odd. I feel like probably should be teaching kids at a young age that they can be involved in what goes on in the world, because I really didn't know. Like I wasn't very aware in my schools. They didn't like really teach about how like you can have protests and they can do things.
Yeah.
Like it's always talked about in like a historic sense or the past tense.
I agree with that. I never had been taught anything until kind of high school, and even then it wasn't that in depth or anything. But that's when in high school when I started to see like student protest and students coming together and trying to get their voices heard, speaking out on different things like that. So
do you think it should be taught? Do you guys think that it should be taught in schools? Like, what should it look like?
I feel like it should at least be introduced to kids at, like in elementary school in like a present tense, not just talking about like civil rights movement. Like that's important to talk about. However, I feel like letting them know that they do have a voice now and that they can change stuff now in the same way. I feel like it's very important for them so they can grow up with that voice.
yeah, implementing it at a young age and then building on throughout middle and high school could definitely help.
Right, yeah, because I feel like all that's really taught about civics is that, and then like the government.
Yeah.
Like I feel like maybe instead of really focusing on like all the branches, like important to know things,
Right.
but like knowing how you can change your town, your state, your country as like your own person, like having your own opinions, like how you can go on and implement those things to create change.
Exactly.
I feel like that would be very important to know.
Yeah, I definitely was not taught civics engagement. Were there any outside influences? Because I feel like I've definitely got into it like a lot more from a younger age because of my mom, or just like family in general.
I think it was really moving to Champaign that kind of changed it for me, because originally I'm from like the suburbs of Chicago, the northwest suburbs, and like it's very suburb like, where people don't really talk about their opinions, they more keep it to themselves, because it's like seen like, why would you care about that? Like it's not that serious. That's like kind of what's seen out there. But over here I feel like people are a lot more like, they know a lot more about what's going on in the world, and they have a lot of more like stronger opinions on things, and that like influenced me to like be like, wait, like maybe I should like figure out what I think is like what are my morals, what I think should be changed in our communities or in our state, and like that really helped me find my grounding and be more engaged in it.
Yeah, I agree. I think kind of like she was saying with the Black Lives Matter protest, seeing that at a younger age. I was in like middle school when that was going on, so being able to like see people coming together and then protesting about an actual situation and problem and how it has been going on like nationally, globally, everything like that. Being able to like see that got me like thinking like, okay, this is something I might want to like take on in the future and start learning more about and stuff like that.
What do you guys think, like if it was taught, what would it look like in the classroom? Like how would you want to be taught it from a student perspective?
I feel just like a really emphasis on the fact that like you have a voice, and like many people will be like, why would I vote? There's so many people. It's like, not my vote's not gonna count. Like it's not gonna make a difference. However, I feel like it does. You do have a say. It's like it's your input, and it does matter. And I feel like for young kids it should be like really focused on that, because I feel like young kids are very impressionable, and as soon as like you kind of tell them like, oh well, you're just a kid, or just like that, it kind of sticks in their head, and then they don't think of themselves as that much.
I feel like kind of like I was saying, implementing at a young age, it'll get them like excited to want to grow up and then have their voice heard, and being able to make changes within their country, community, state, anything. So
I feel like also maybe like not having it as such a taboo topic. I feel like a lot of people they don't talk about like, let's say like politics or like current events in the world, because they don't want to like start a problem. But I feel like the conversations are like really needed. Like we really need to have these conversations, especially with people like close by, to know like who really like has that in common with you. Because I feel like it's very easy to like stay friends with someone even though they don't think the same way you, just for like the convenience, just because it's easy. However, like if you really think about it, why would you be friends with someone who thinks so completely different from you and is so like, they have such different sense? Like I feel like with like for example, the whole Free Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids are like pro-Israel in our school, and it's like very strange because your friends are Free Palestine, like, and then they're just like, well, no, like they'll just like to stay that close of friends with people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's very damaging for yourself and like not good for your well-being to know that this person is thinking like it's totally on like, not to say the opposite, but like they're on the opposite side. They're like on the wrong side compared to you, and I just feel like that's not great.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna change topics a little tiny bit. Okay, so there's an Illinois school code, and it says that civics engagement like should be taught based on. I'm gonna read it. Okay. So, civics course content shall focus on government institutions, the discussions of current and controversial issues, service learning, and simulations of the democratic process. Do you guys agree with this? Like that way of teaching?
I feel like it should be like a more higher focus on like practicing of what it's like to be a person having an opinion like in the politics. I feel like I feel like we should really teach people like how to properly vote for someone.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of people, like a young age, they like turn 18 and they go to vote. I feel like a couple of them are just like they just go and vote and they don't really do the research on the candidate or like what they're like fully go into like what they want for the country. And I feel like that should be like focused on a lot more than like the branches of the government or stuff like that.
You think you think teachers could do that, or like a curriculum could get that across without being biased, or like, you know?
I feel like it could. I feel like they just really need like good teachers for that. Yeah. Because I feel like even some teachers who like aren't biased are very much biased, and you can tell in the way that they teach or in the way that like the words they use to teach certain things. Yeah. Like there's some teachers who like talk about like protests, and it's like, do you really think this is a good thing? Because it's not sounding like you think this is a good thing. It's sounding like you thought they were just creating noise. It's kind of odd how some act. I also feel like teachers being like not necessarily super unbiased, but like not let it seep into like how they teach kids is very important, because like at the end of the day, everyone's has the right to their own opinion and to their own beliefs, and I feel like some teachers kind of push it on their students, and then it kind of creates discourse, and then you really can't connect with those kids, because then they think that you're like against them, like the enemy or something like that. Yep.
Like what you said about voting, like teaching a kid how to vote. What would you put in a curriculum or like a day-to-day lesson that would like help them figure out what's right and what's wrong?
I also feel like media literacy is very important, especially online. Like like I know like we have like these type of classes where like they go over like, oh, make sure you know you're using a credible source, or make sure you're like actually reading what it says and not make sure it's not biased. But I feel like there should be more emphasis on that, especially now like with social media, how so much more things get out and can be like spread very fast. I feel like it should be very focused on that, and like maybe have some lessons on how to tell if something's biased or how to like fact check something, and then like some lessons on just like being able to comprehend, because I feel like also people's campaigns, like president campaigns, like the way they word things might be confusing to some, because like political like things, the way they're written is like maybe could be a tad bit confusing. I feel like learning how to read those and knowing what they mean, like understand the vocabulary and everything. I feel like that would be very important as well.
Okay, we're gonna let you talk. We've been talking.
Okay. I feel like being able to teach the vocabulary and understand like what's actually being said, because you could watch a debate or anything like that and you can like think you know what they're trying to say, but you're really like lost. So then being able to actually understand and debrief and like process the information, be able to further understand what's being said and everything. But as far as a lesson, I don't know what I would personally implement into a curriculum.
Okay, how would you guys take that? Like, at what age do you think you could like what's the word?
Like fully comprehend it.
Yeah, like fully take it in.
I think now, honestly, like kind of junior to senior year, that would be a good time because that's when you're about to actually become an adult and start voting and have a voice in your actual country. But also before that, like middle school and being actually taught information, but being able to actually understand what voting is and what it does and how it affects your country and stuff like that, from things to gas prices or jobs and pay and stuff like that. So.
I feel like an introduction in middle school and then like really go in on it in the last 2 years, like how you said, because I feel like for example, like personal finance, it's very useful to use right like at the end of your high school because you're going out. And I feel like if we had something that would really focus on how to vote, how to like educate yourself of what's going on like politically, like locally, like state-wise, like globally, I feel like it would be really good to like learn about in junior and senior year because you're about to leave and you're about to be put into those situations where you have to actually act on it.
Exactly.
So we were talking about civics engagement like on like this scale and here and just like students and peers in school, but how do you feel like it's defined on like a national and global scale? You think it's different?
I feel like it's a tad bit different. I feel like locally it's very like specific things and like you can get really far into it, but I feel like on like country wise or like state wise, it's a lot of a broader like things that you're working with, and it's like I feel like it's better with groups of people to do it, like to be civically engaged and like have it make change, if it's like state-wise or like by the country, like globally. But I feel like in like local things, you like yourself can make a lot of change, and like you can have a lot of like you can be in charge of a lot of things, and like if you did create like a group of people, like you can really like get to all of them and like figure out what everyone really wants out of it. And I feel like a statewide country, it's very like big and broad, and it's like a bit harder to like
I agree,
like get everyone's opinions and stuff like that.
I think it's different in like the population and everything, because like in the small or not even small city like Champaign or Urbana, if you have a group of people that's coming together and just speaking out about something, you're gonna eventually, I hope, get your voice heard and have your opinions processed and everything like that. Because I feel like the power in numbers, especially in like communities, is definitely very powerful, because it allows you to be like louder. Because if you're seeing that this group of people is fighting for what they think is right, and it's whatever percent of your population in the city, you're going to want to address that situation.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think it'd definitely be harder too, because it's like really small here. Like we have like 3 schools. Yeah. Like if we were somewhere bigger like Texas or like Atlanta and we did the Palestine protest thing, I think it would have ended really differently.
Oh, definitely. I feel like also the benefit of being in our state that normally gets like, it's like a blue state, even though like most of it is red, but just like the big like major cities. I feel like that's a very beneficial for us, because I feel like it allows us to be more active in certain ways, and like other states kids can't be as active. And it's,
what is a blue state?
A blue state like
Democratic Republic,
like Democratic state.
Like
Okay. And I feel like countrywide it's a bit harder to kind of get everyone on like not necessarily on the same exact page, but like for something or for a change, because it's like you really gotta cater to everyone. And
and
really,
it's like, all these different communities and people beliefs coming together at the same time.
It's a bit harder.
Okay, so we're gonna close out in a way, not really, but what are some last words you have for like teachers and school policies when it comes to civics education? Like, what would you change? What do you like so far? What would you tell them personally?
I feel like giving like kids more of a chance to be, because like with the Palestine thing that happened in our school, they shut it down very fast. Like they let it go on, but they shut it down very fast. And I feel like they weren't doing any harm. They were just literally walking throughout the school with signs. And I feel like, what's wrong with that, really? if like teachers feel like it was disruptive, like you can close your door. I just feel like giving kids a chance to just be more, like I feel like a lot of people, they doubt kids because they think like, oh, you're teenagers, you don't fully know the world, you don't fully get it. But I feel like nowadays through social media you get to see a lot of it more firsthand, and like it causes like kids to form their opinions a lot younger than I feel like they happened before, because you'd have to look at the news or you had to listen to the radio, and kids didn't really want to do that. And I feel like the world instead just needs to give like younger people a bigger chance, like more of a chance, and not belittle them as much as they do.
Right. Teachers, I definitely say, kind of like you were saying, like being unbiased. Like I had a teacher, he hated Trump, which, I mean, that's fine. I don't care. Even if you love Trump, I don't have a hate or dislike towards you because of your opinion. But I feel like for students that might have family members or they themselves are supporting Trump, like you were saying, like it creates like a barrier between the students and the teachers. Like they're not allowed to like connect with them as well, and it creates friction that doesn't need, like it's not necessary for it to be there.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that happen a lot too.
Me too.
Like where students are like, oh, I don't like this teacher because they just keep going on this and this and this, and then like it turns into this big thing. Where I feel like not to like silence teachers on their opinions or stuff like that, or where they stand, because you know they have the right to. I just feel like if they want to be like so openly about their political views, to also be open to the kids, like with having a rebuttal to that, or
because
like,
it's controversial.
Yeah, without like shutting them down, because I feel like a lot of teachers would be like, oh yeah, we're not going to talk about that, we're not going to get into that right now, when like they started the conversation. I feel like especially in like my freshman year of English, I had this teacher who was very opinionated on her things and with students, and it was an activity where it was like, do you disagree like strongly or not, like stuff like that. So it's supposed to be an open conversation to everyone's opinions, but she would just shut down the people that just like disagreed with what she agreed to, or agreed to what she disagreed to. It was a very odd thing, and a lot of students left that class like being like, I don't like this teacher. She tries to like push down all this stuff, and I feel like it wasn't beneficial to those kids, and those kids left that class not learning. Yeah,
I feel like those conversations are what need to be had and talked about, because it allows people to view different opinions and see how other people think and how they process information and everything.
Yeah, I think that's what makes it hard for me to really engage in civics, or like get even interested in school, because I think teachers, especially with teachers, because they hold that power and authority, so their opinion, it like kind of overshadows you. Yeah. And they might treat you differently or whatever based on whatever you think, so I can't.
And like you were saying, like belittling kids, and because they think that you're lower than them or you know less than them because you haven't been through as much or experienced as much life as they have. So.
Right. And I feel like a lot of them do it in a very rude way as well.
Yeah.
And they'll just like keep in mind like, oh, you cause trouble, or you just always want to start a debate. Like I had a health teacher that would play Joe Rogan podcast on purpose for these two kids in my class to like argue and fight. And he knew that they would fight about it, and he knew these two kids did not get along, but he would purposely play it. And then he would be like, okay, Jackson, like you need to calm down. And he was like the only girl in the conversation, but he would only tell like her to calm down because she was having opposing views to everyone else. And it was very like an odd thing to see happen. Like I just feel like teachers need to be more open to the kids having different opinions from them, and being open to having those conversations with them. And if they truly feel strong about them, like having an actual conversation about the politics and about like the events that like maybe what they were talking about, like whatever topic was the cause of the conversation, like talking with that kid through that instead of just telling them to like be quiet, like move on.
I think that's a big thing too. Like school policy is really focused on students and like them saying things wrong, them doing things wrong, and punishing them. So I think it's hard to be like engaged civically when if you go report it, nothing's gonna happen. But if a teacher reports you, you could get in trouble. Yeah. Like I know there was a teacher who got fired from our school for was he fired or just?
No, he was I think he was suspended.
Yeah.
Because he's like gonna retire until they brought him back, which I feel like is a very like I get it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But also, he very much like was really rude to a kid in front of the whole class.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very open about his opinions on certain things, and he would say some very questionable things about like race
Mm-hmm.
or like gender identity and stuff like that. And it was like he said something like very rude to a kid, and all he got was like suspended for like a week.
Yeah.
And he came back like nothing happened.
Right.
And there was some teachers that were like, well, he's just like, he's just old,
Yeah.
Oh.
I feel right, so he should know that
Exactly.
there's a time and place to say something, and the time is not in school when you're
Yeah.
an authoritative figure.
I just think school policy really like panders to teachers, especially when it comes to civics education and like talking about serious topics. If it's between a student and a teacher, they're going to take the teacher's side.
Right.
So it's hard to really engage in that. So if I had a word for like teachers or had the opportunity to change school policy, I would start with that. Like equaling out the consequences for like feeling uncomfortable
Yeah.
as a
Mhm.
student.
I feel like also go back to like stop belittling
Yeah.
young people. Like we do have opinions and we do have thoughts about what's going on in the world. And I feel like maybe not to say that ours matters more, but we are the people that are going on to
Exactly.
like be a part of the world and like have it charge of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if there was a lot more focus on uplifting our voices, it'll be a lot easier to then go into the world and like do things. I feel like older generation, like, and they just have such like they think that we really don't care, or that
Mhm.
we're like, we think the world's gonna be perfect and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We just want the world to be like perfect and just live happy little lives. But like,
Mhm.
I don't know, it's kind of odd how they would just like shut down our ideas,
Mhm.
but then they're like, how can we change this? And they won't take the
Opinions and
opinions
voices
and
of
new opinions and
kids,
voices. They'll just like shut it down.
teenagers.
It's like, no,
Right.
not that.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that if I had to like say another thing to teachers, it would be like, instead of like shutting down the topic or just not talking about it at all, do your research and figure out a way to talk about it respectfully and unbiasedly. Like,
Mhm.
or maybe don't just have the conversation in the class.
Or like
yeah.
our English teacher sophomore year.
Yeah.
And even if it is a biased conversation or two
Mhm.
opposite opinions trying to come together and talk, being able to see the other person's point of view and how they think and believe.
Right, like
What-
just be mature about
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
have a mature conversation about it and not something that's like very back and forth and very like kind of
Mhm.
argumentative. I feel like
Exactly.
if you actually have like, I think that's also some people get wrong, is when they think like have a conversation about it, usually they're having an argument about it,
Right.
or they're having, and I feel like more casual conversation about it will be much needed, because then it will take the stigma out of it, and it will like
Yeah.
help people be like more opinionated, because
Mhm.
I feel like people fear about being opinionated because they don't want to like go against certain people in their
Mhm.
lives.
Yeah.
But I feel like everyone's has the right to their own opinion, and that's like something that really needs to be emphasized.
Right. And I feel like another part is when those conversations get argumentative, it happens because of people's emotions coming into play, and then they start thinking about how whatever happened or the situation, how it makes them feel, instead of leaving that out and actually having the conversation between two
Right.
people, and not, I'm on this side, you're on this side, we're going to war.
I feel also like when you have conversations like that, you can find that some things you guys like do agree on,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right.
like-
Yeah.
while like maybe you might you don't agree on certain matters. There's some things that you're like, oh well, we both have this shared common goal of just wanting this, because I feel
Mhm.
like sometimes like on either side of like the spectrum of like the political parties, I feel like sometimes both sides have like this end goal
Mm-hmm.
that is like very similar, but just like the way that they get there is
Right.
different. And I feel like if we had more conversation about it, we could find a way to like have it not necessarily cater to like both sides, but something that will like support kind of everyone.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, at least try and get everyone's opinion and to like find a solution.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like having conversations is it's just like an easier way to do that. Like if we started like now, then it would be much easier to do as an adult,
Exactly.
or like to someone who has like technically authority over you. I feel like it'd be a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys have any other thoughts, you can share them. But pretty much.
I think I'm good.
Honestly, I feel like this was very good.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the conversation, even though like we were kind of on the same side about everything, I feel like this was very nice to be able to talk about and like feel like I was being heard.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like being able to voice teenagers' opinions, especially ones that are like locally in the school, I feel like it was really helpful, and hopefully this podcast is helpful to other people.
I agree.